Chapter 19. 2 weeks earlier, Leslie had told me that I was to be repatriated and reinstated into normal society. I was to live with my uncle. Those 2 weeks felt longer than the 8 months I'd spent at Bennon home. I was worried about living with a family. I had been on my own for years and had taken care of myself without any guidance from anyone. I was afraid that I might look ungrateful to my uncle, who didn't have to take me in, if I distanced myself from the family unit. I was worried about what to do when my nightmares and migraines took hold of me. How was I going to explain my sadness, which I'm unable to hide, as it takes over my face, to my new family, especially the children? I didn't have answers to these questions, and when I told Esther about them, she told me that everything was going to be fine, but I wanted more than just reassurance. I lay in my bed night after night, staring at the ceiling and thinking, why have I survived the war? Why was I the last person in my immediate family to be alive? I didn't know. I stopped playing soccer and table tennis. I went to see Esther every day, though, and would say hello, ask how she was, and then get lost in my own head, thinking about what my life was going to be like after the center. Sometimes Esther would have to snap her fingers in front of my face to bring me back. At night, I quietly sat on the veranda with Mohammed Al-Haji and Mambu. I wouldn't notice when they left the bench that we all sat on. When the day of my repatriation came, I packed my few belongings into a plastic bag. I had a pair of sneakers, 4 t-shirts, 3 shorts, toothpaste, a toothbrush, a bottle of Vaseline lotion, a Walkman, and some cassettes, 2 long-sleeve shirts, and 2 pairs of pants and a tie. These had been bought for me to wear to my conference talks. I waited, my heart beating faster, the way it had when my mother dropped me off for the first time at the boarding school. The van was heard galloping on the gravel road, making its way to the center. Picking up my plastic bag, I walked to the hospital building where I was to wait. Mohammed Al-Haji and Mambu were sitting on the front steps, and Esther emerged smiling. The van made a turn and halted at the side of the road. It was late afternoon. The sky was still blue, but the sun was dull, hiding behind the only cloud. Leslie sat in the front seat and waited for me to board, so he could take me to my new home. I have to go, I said to everyone, my voice shaking. I extended my hand to Mohammed, but instead of shaking it, he leapt up and hugged me. Mambu embraced me while Mohammed was still holding me. He squeezed me hard as if he knew it was goodbye forever. After I left the center, Mambu went back to the front lines because his family refused to take him in. At the end of the hug, Al-Haji shook hands with me. We squeezed each other's hand and stared into each other's eyes, remembering all that we had been through. I tapped him on the shoulder and he smiled, as if he understood that I was saying we were going to be fine. I never saw him again, since he continually moved from one foster home to another. At the end of our handshake, Al-Haji stepped back, saluted me, and whispered, "Goodbye, squad leader." I tapped him on the shoulder again. I couldn't salute him in return. Esther stepped forward, her eyes watery. She hugged me tighter than she'd ever had. I didn't return her hug very well, as I was busy trying to hold back my tears. After she let go, she gave me a piece of paper. "This is my address. Come any time," she said. I went to Esther's home several weeks after that. My timing wasn't good. She was on her way to work. She hugged me, and this time I squeezed back. This made her laugh after we stood apart. She looked me straight in the eyes. "Come and see me next weekend so we can have more time to catch up, okay?" she said. She was wearing her white uniform, and she was on her way to take on other traumatized children. It must be tough living with so many war stories. I was just living with one, mine, and it was difficult, as the nightmares about what had happened continued to torment me. Why does she do it? Why do they all do it? I thought as we went our separate ways. It was the last time I saw her. I loved her, but I never told her. My uncle picked me up in his arms as soon as I got off the van and carried me onto the veranda. "I welcome you today like a chief. Your feet may touch the ground when you lose your chieftaincy, which begins now," my uncle said, laughing as he set me down. I smiled, but I was nervous. My 4 cousins, Ali and the 3 girls, Matilda, Kona, and Sambo, took turns hugging me, their faces bright with smiles. "You must be hungry. I cooked you a welcome home sake tomboy," my aunt said. She had made cassava leaves with chicken just to welcome me. To have chicken prepared for anyone was a rarity, and it was considered an honor. People ate chicken only on holidays like Christmas or New Year's. Auntie Sally held my hand and made me sit on the bench next to my uncle. She brought the food out, and my uncle and I ate together from the same plate with our hands. It was a good meal, and I licked my fingers, enjoying the rich palm oil. My uncle looked at me laughing and said to his wife, "Sally, you've done it again. This one is here to stay." After we washed our hands, my cousin Ali, 21 years old, was called to the veranda and asked to show me where I was to sleep. I took my plastic bag and followed him to another house that was behind the one with my uncle's bedroom. The passageway between the houses was like a pathway with stones carefully placed on either side of the walkway. Allie held the door for me as I entered the clean, organized room. The bed was made, the clothes that hung on a post were ironed, and the shoes were properly lined on a rack, and the brown tile floor was shiny. He pulled a mattress from under the bed and explained to me that I'd sleep on the floor, as he and his roommate shared the bed. I was to fold the mattress and put it back under the bed every morning. After he was done explaining how I could contribute to keeping the room clean and in order, I went back to the veranda and sat with my uncle. He put his arm around me and pulled my nose. Are you familiar with the city, Uncle asked. Not really. Allie will take you around sometime if you like, or you can venture out there yourself, get lost, and find your way. It'll be a good way to get to know the city. He chuckled. We heard a call for prayer that echoed throughout the city. I have to go to prayers, but if you need anything, ask your cousins, he said, taking the kettle from the stoop to begin to perform ablution. After he was done, he walked down the hill to a nearby mosque. My aunt came out of the room, tying her head with a cloth, and followed my uncle. I sighed, sitting alone on the veranda. I was no longer nervous, but I missed Ben and home. Later that night, when my uncle and aunt returned from prayers, all my new family gathered around a cassette player on the veranda to listen to stories. My uncle rubbed his hands, pressed the play button, and the famous storyteller, Leah Gomboaba, began telling a story about a man who had forgotten his heart at home when he went traveling around the world. I had heard the story in my grandmother's village when I was younger. My new family laughed throughout the telling of the story. I only smiled and was very quiet that night, as I was to be for a while more. But gradually, I adjusted to being around people who were happy all the time. A day or two after I started living with my uncle, Allie gave me my first pair of dress shoes, a dress belt, and a stylish shirt. If you want to be a gentleman, you have to dress like one, he laughed. I was about to ask him why he'd been giving me these things when he began to explain. This is a secret. I want to take you to a dance tonight so you can enjoy yourself. We will leave after Uncle goes to bed. That night, we snuck out and went dancing at a pub. As Allie and I walked, I remembered that I used to go dancing back in secondary school with my friends. It seemed so long ago, but I still recall the different names of the dance nights. Back to school, pens down, Bob Marley night, and many more. We would dance until cockcrow and then take off our sweaty shirts and enjoy the cool morning breeze as we walked back to our dorms. I was truly happy back then. We are here, Allie said, shaking my hand and snapping his fingers. There were lots of young people waiting in line to get into the pub. The boys were well dressed, their pants ironed and shirts tucked in. The girls wore beautiful flowered dresses and high heels that made them taller than some of the boys they were with. Their lips were also painted with bright colors. Allie was excited, and he chatted with the people in front of us. I was quiet, looking at the different colored lights that hung at the entrance. There was one big blue light that made the people's white shirts especially beautiful. We finally made it to the entrance, and Allie paid for the two of us. The music was extremely loud inside, but then again, I had not been to a pub for many years. I followed Allie to the bar area, where we found a table and sat on two high stools. I'm going to the dance floor, Allie announced, screaming so I could hear him. He disappeared into the crowd. I sat for a while scoping out the place and slowly began dancing by myself in a corner of the dance floor. Suddenly, an extremely dark girl whose smile illuminated the dance floor pulled me and led me to the middle of the floor before I could resist. She started dancing close to me. I looked back at Allie, who was standing at the bar. He gave me a thumbs up, and I began to move slowly until the rhythm took over. I danced one of the Reggae Morphe song with the girl, and then there was a slow jam. She pulled me toward her, and I held her hand delicately as we swayed to the music. I could feel her heartbeat. She tried to catch my eyes, but I looked away. In the middle of the song, some older boy pulled her away from me. She waved as she was being escorted through the crowd toward the door. You're smooth, man, I saw that. Allie was now standing next to me. He began walking toward the bar, and I followed him. We leaned against the counter, facing the dance floor. He was still smiling. I really didn't do anything. She just wanted to dance with me, and I couldn't say no, I said. Exactly. You say nothing, and the women come to you, he teased. I didn't want to talk anymore. A memory of a town we had attacked during a school dance had been triggered. I could hear the terrified cries of teachers and students, could see the blood cover the dance floor. Allie tapped me on the shoulder and brought me back to the present. I smiled at him, but I was deeply sad for the rest of our stay. We danced all night and returned before Uncle woke up. A few nights later, I returned to the pub alone and saw the same girl. She told me her name was Zainab. Sorry about last time, she said. My brother wanted to go home and I had to go with him. Otherwise, my parents would have gotten worried. Like me, she was alone this night. I dated her for 3 weeks, but then she began to ask too many questions. Where was I from? What was it like growing up upline? Upline is a Creole word mostly used in Freetown to refer to the backwardness of the inner country, its habitants, and their mannerisms. I was unwilling to tell her anything, so she broke it off. That was the story of my relationship with girls in Freetown. They wanted to know more about me, and I wasn't ready to tell them. It was okay. I liked being alone.